Welcome, and thank you for watching this presentation about the draft Allston-Brighton Mobility Plan. This presentation will last for about 25 minutes. If you need translation of this presentation into Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, or Mandarin, please email us at this address to let us know your language needs. Also, since you are viewing this presentation on YouTube, you can turn on closed captioning in your preferred language by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. In this presentation, we'll introduce you to the planning team, tell you how and why we've developed this plan, show you how it's organized, highlight key recommendations, and give you a flavor of some of the plan's specific recommendations, as well as showing you how to review and comment on the plan. My name is Tad Reed, and I'm Senior Deputy Director for Transportation and Infrastructure Planning at the BPDA, the agency leading the AB Mobility Study. I'm joined by my colleague, Jack Halverson, who's been working with me on the plan since we started about 2 years ago. While the BPDA has been leading the study, we've been working closely with other city departments. Here you see members of the Interdepartmental Working Group that have been advising and guiding us since the beginning. Represented on the working group are staff of the Boston Transportation Department, Department of Public Works, Disabilities Commission, and Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services. We've also been collaborating with partners outside the city, including those that you see on this slide, such as the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the MBTA. We are also fortunate to have a talented team of consultants who have been doing the lion's share of the analytical and plan development work. Connor Semler is the project manager, and he's joined by Jesus Cuellar and Meredith Saunders. Turning to background and why we prepared this plan. As many of you already know, a main impetus for this study has been the pace of new development in recent years. As shown on this slide, during the last several years, approximately 10 million square feet of new development has been filed for review, been approved, or is under construction. This makes Allston-Brighton one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in Boston. Concerns about the pace of new development and the ability of existing transportation infrastructure to support this development have prompted this plan. Another impetus for the plan is our citywide transportation plan called Go Boston 2030. Adopted in 2017, Go Boston 2030 establishes goals to increase travel trips made by a more sustainable transportation mode, such as walking, biking, public transportation, and carpooling. As shown in this diagram, Go Boston 2030 calls for shifting mode shares towards the proportion shown in the last line of this table. While some areas of Allston-Brighton are already fairly close to these goals, other areas have a ways to go. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we developed the plan. We started this process in the fall of 2018. As shown in this timeline, the process has involved 3 main phases: defining the problem, analyzing and testing options, and presenting draft recommendations. During each phase, we've had many conversations in the community, mostly in person, but also online. As shown in this chart, to date, we've held 3 open houses, half a dozen area workshops, met with 10 civic groups, and offered 2 different online mapping tools. All combined, these have generated significant public comment. During the process, over 250 individuals have attended public meetings in person, and through a combination of in-person and online engagement, we have received over 1,200 comments. Plan recommendations reflect many of the comments we've heard from you. Many of these comments have been transcribed and are interspersed throughout the plan, as shown on this slide. What we will be presenting today is the final draft plan. The lion's share of the recommendations that are contained in the plan have been vetted publicly over the last year, starting in the fall of 2019. Toward the end of this presentation, I'll tell you about various ways to review and comment on the plan between now and the deadline for comments, which is January 15th, 2021. Now I'd like to show you how the plan is organized. Looking at the table of contents, on the left, you can see that the first 4 chapters include an executive summary, as well as background on the planning process, community engagement, and planning context. Chapter 5 presents what we call area-wide and network recommendations, recommendations that span most or all of Allston-Brighton. Chapter 6 moves to area-specific recommendations, that is, recommendations that pertain to specific parts of Allston-Brighton, namely the area of Brighton south of the Turnpike, Allston Village, and the area north of the Pike. Color coding will help you find recommendations for a specific area. For example, green is used for all recommendations for Brighton south of the Pike. These colors are repeated in banners across the tops of the pages throughout Chapter 6. Chapter 7 contains what we're calling the action plan. The action plan lists nearly 24 recommendations that the city is committing to implement during the next 4 years. I'll come back to this later. Finally, you can find all the recommendations of the plan summarized in a single, easy-to-reference document. Look for this summary in Appendix A. Now, let's turn to the executive summary. We'll start by showing you the plan's goals. These goals were developed early on in the process with public input. What you see here are abbreviated versions of the goals presented in Chapter 4 of the plan. These include increase safety for all modes, allocate space in streets to accommodate diverse users, increase the sustainability of the transportation system, improve equity in transportation, provide priority accommodations for buses, create a more attractive and comfortable walking and bicycling environment, enhance parking and permit regulations, accommodate local and regional growth, and identify opportunities for new development to mitigate its transportation impacts. This map from the executive summary highlights some of the key recommendations of the draft plan. For those of you who have participated in the AV mobility planning process previously, most of the recommendations will look familiar. Nevertheless, many have been modified based on your feedback. As the key on the left shows, the darker of the 2 thick lines on this map represents bus priority lanes. The lighter of the 2 thick lines represents separated bike lanes. Bus priority lanes are proposed from Parsons Street near Oak Square all the way to Union Square, connecting to the bus lanes that were recently installed on Brighton Avenue between Union Square and Packard's Corner. As this diagram shows, over the longer term, the plan proposes extending the bus priority lanes along Cambridge Street over to the Charles River, as well as to a future West Station in Beacon Yards. Please note that the bus priority lanes on Washington Street and Cambridge Streets are designed to accommodate bicycles. However, for bicyclists not comfortable riding in the same lane with buses, the plan also proposes a complementary bike facility containing separated bike lanes, extending from Oak Square to Union Square, as shown here. In fact, just as the plan proposes continuing bus priority lanes along Cambridge Street to the Charles River and to West Station, it also proposes extending separated bike lanes down Cambridge Street to the Charles River, as well as over to West Station. Now I'd like to call your attention to this transit network map, which reflects certain draft plan proposals to improve and expand transit. I've already introduced you to the recommendation for the bus priority lanes, extending from Oak Square to Union Square and beyond. Let me tell you more about how the bus priority lanes will work. This diagram shows the existing cross-section on Washington Street and Cambridge Street. Curbside parking is available on both sides of the street, with bicycle lanes inboard of the parking and 2-way vehicular travel lanes down the center of the street. Compare that to this cross-section representing the proposed peak hour bus lanes. In this proposed cross-section, during morning and afternoon rush hours, On-street parking would be replaced by bus priority lanes. During the morning and afternoon peak hours, buses will travel next to the curb. Bikes will use the next lane in, and vehicles would travel along the center 2 lanes. We estimate that the peak hour bus priority lanes will reduce bus travel times between Oak Square and Union Square by up to 11 minutes eastbound and up to 6 minutes westbound. The peak hour bus lanes will be very similar to the peak hour bus lanes that have been operating successfully on Washington Street between Roslindale Square and Forest Hills since 2017. Off-peak, that is, during most of the rest of the day, as shown in the street section on the right, the bus lanes will be replaced again with on-street parking, and bicycles will use the marked on-street bike lanes. The bus priority lanes would begin as a pilot. At the end of the pilot, an assessment would be made to determine if the bus priority lanes should be made permanent. Also, before installing the lanes, the city will conduct a parking utilization study along Washington and Cambridge streets to determine the appropriate strategy for managing on-street parking. The transit network map also shows where work still needs to be done to resolve a gap in the proposed new bus network on Cambridge Street, just east of Union Square. This planning work will be carried out in 2021. Area-wide recommendations also include an expansion of the bicycle network. This bike network map shows where bike lanes would be added to the existing and planned bike network. Existing and previously planned facilities are shown in blue. New bike facilities proposed by the AB Mobility Plan are shown in yellow. Thinner lines show bike lanes. Thicker lines show separated bike lanes. As you can see, the plan proposes new separated bike lanes in the following locations. As I mentioned before, from Oak Square to Union Square, extending along Faneuil Street, Market Street, and North Beacon Street. Along Chestnut Hill Avenue from Brighton Center to Comm Ave, and along Washington Street from Brighton Center to Corey Road. Additionally, over the long term, north of the Pike, the plan proposes a 2-way separated bike path extending from the North Beacon Street Bridge along Leo Birmingham Parkway, continuing along the green space located along the southern edge of Lincoln Street, ultimately connecting over to West Station and the Charles River. Please note that the bike network map reflects certain locations in Allston where gaps in the bike network still need to be resolved. In 2021, the city will conduct a public process to resolve these gaps. You'll also note that the map highlights boundaries of the Western Avenue Corridor Study and Rezoning Project. Underway right now, the Corridor Study is engaging the community to explore different land use and development build-out options. Integral to this analysis will be transportation improvement options and recommendations. Transportation recommendations coming out of the Western Avenue Corridor Study will be incorporated by reference into the AV Mobility Plan. Finally, the area-wide recommendations also address placemaking. Placemaking is an approach to planning and design whereby the goal is to make public spaces more interesting, engaging, and memorable. From a transportation perspective, good placemaking encourages more walking. One of the key placemaking recommendations of the AV Mobility Study is a pilot tree planting program involving a continuous tree trench. As shown in this diagram, a continuous tree trench running between trees helps capture more rainwater, improve irrigation, and increase tree survival. This photo shows a tree trench capped by permeable pavers that was recently built in front of Harvard's new Science and Engineering Complex on Western Avenue near Berry's Corner. This map shows which streets are being recommended for the pilot tree trench program. These include Market Street, North Beacon Street, and Chestnut Hill Avenue, all of which have a notable lack of good tree canopies. It should be noted that tree canopies can also help reduce the heat island effect that can exacerbate climate change. The draft plan contains additional placemaking placemaking recommendations for these other parts of Allston-Brighton, as described in Chapter 5. Chapter 6 of the plan contains over 50 recommendations for different areas of Allston-Brighton. To whet your appetite for perusing the plan yourself, I'm going to give you a glimpse of just a few of the plan's recommendations. In Allston Village, for Harvard Avenue, short-term recommendations call for relocating bus stops, extending curbs, and adjusting curbside use regulations. Curbside use changes may also include placemaking opportunities. The long-term recommendation for Harvard Avenue calls for dedicated bus lanes and a spacious plaza between Commonwealth Avenue and Brighton Avenue. Also in Allston Village, on the Franklin Street Bridge, the plan recommends creative lighting and public art to improve safety and make the bridge more inviting. North of the Pike, recommendations for Lincoln Street would help calm traffic by introducing chicanes, or in other words, a slight weaving pattern along the street, by alternating parking on different sides of the street. Also on Lincoln Street, an enhanced crosswalk would reinforce traffic calming while increasing pedestrian safety. North of the Pike as well, on Leo Birmingham Parkway, surplus roadway capacity provides the opportunity to repurpose the westbound carriageway to create a two-way bike path and additional open space, as shown here. The additional open space would also provide opportunities for placemaking. The proposed improvements would begin as temporary or what we call tactical changes. If successful, they would be made permanent. Back over in Brighton Center, temporary tactical strategies could also be used at the intersection of Washington Street and Market Street. Here, the plan proposes moving the right turn slip lane over towards the center of Market Street, creating new space for a plaza and potentially public art where the slip lane currently exists. Note that the right turn lane would not be eliminated. It is simply moved over. Once again, these changes would start as temporary and if successful, could later be made permanent. Also in Brighton Center, at the intersection of Washington Street, Cambridge Street, and Winship Street, the plan recommends new lane markings be added to clarify turning movements at this complicated intersection. Still in Brighton, on Washington Street between Brighton Center and Corey Road, the plan recommends a two-way bike facility. As shown in the proposed street section, a two-way bike path would be physically separated from vehicular travel lanes. This recommendation would require removing parking on one side of the street. Before implementing this recommendation, a study would be conducted to understand impacts on parking. Also, BTD would conduct a localized community process to engage residents, abutters, and stakeholders in the design of this facility. Finally, over in Oak Square, in response to very clear requests from the local community, 2 enhanced crosswalks are recommended at these locations, and pickup and drop-off zones would be created at these locations. Examples of strategies to enhance crosswalks are shown in these photos. They include curb extensions, raised crosswalks, signage, and vertical posts, among other possible strategies. Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that Chapter 7 contains the action plan. The action plan lists nearly 24 recommended projects that will be completed between 2021 and 2025, including 9 projects that will be completed during 2021. As you can see, the action plan uses cost categories, similar to what you might find in a travel guide, to indicate the relative cost of improvements. It also shows the time frame for implementation, whether there will be a developer contribution, and the lead agency responsible for ushering the project forward. In addition to the action plan, the draft plan contains Appendix A, a list of all the plan's over 50 recommendations, organized in the same way as the plan itself. First by area-wide recommendations, then by area-specific recommendations with the same color coding. Here, you will find a brief description of each recommendation, cost category, lead agency, and the page number on the plan where you can find all the details about the recommendation. But wait, there's more, lots more. We've shown you just a few of the plan's more than 50 recommendations for all of Allston-Brighton. We hope this presentation will entice you to attend some of the upcoming public meetings and chats with the planner, and download and comment on the plan on your own. Here's some information to help you register for upcoming public meetings and download and comment on the plan. We will be hosting a virtual open house on Tuesday, December 1st from 6 to 8 p.m., where you will be able to learn and ask questions about any aspect of the plan. We'll also be hosting informal chats with a planner, where you can talk one-on-one with planners to ask questions about the plan. The chats with the planner will take place on November 23rd at 12 noon and December 10th at 5:30 p.m. To register for any of these online meetings, go to our website at bit.ly/ABmobility. If you would like to review a hard copy of the plan, call one of the 2 libraries listed here. 5 copies of the plan are on reserve at each library. We've also created an online feedback tool. This can be found on our website, and Jack will give you a demonstration on how this works now.
You can visit our website to access this tool I'm about to show you. There are 2 portions of this feedback tool, a panel on the left side of the screen and a panel on the right side of the screen. Using the panel on the left side of the screen, you can scroll between different sections of the plan. For instance, I'm scrolling on the left side now to reach the table of contents. Now I'm scrolling on to the left side to get to the executive summary. Once you've scrolled to the section of the plan you want to review, you can then scroll through the right-hand side of the screen to view the pages in that section. Then, enter in any comments you have into the comment box on the left side of the screen. Make sure you click Submit before either adding another comment to that section or moving on to a new one. You can submit as many comments on as many sections as you'd like. Additionally, we have a table of contents where you can click on a specific chapter of the plan and be directed right to it. Here, I'm clicking on the Lincoln Street section. At any point, you can click this text at the bottom that says Return to the table of contents to be brought back to the beginning. As always, we will still accept any comments and questions you may have by emailing us at abmobility@boston.gov.
This concludes our presentation. We hope this has helped familiarize you with the plan and piqued your interest in learning more. We look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming virtual meetings and receiving your feedback. As always, if you have any questions, please email them to us at abmobility@boston.gov. Thank you for your time and attention. Keep moving and keep safe.